Hi, everyone. My name is Michelle Kim. I've been in the tech industry across sales, marketing, operations for 15 plus years, and I'm currently a director of sales operations at Zendesk. I've benefited tremendously from mentorship, sponsorship, so really support the West mission and happy to be here and learn from these amazing leaders today. Just one quick housekeeping item before we jump in. We'd love to utilize the chat in today's session. So if you have anything you're interested in hearing about today, just pop it into the chat. We'll try to get to all questions in the Q&A section of the panel. Now, on to our main topic for today, tech innovation for good. Courtney, Sam, Sara, and Karina, can you please share a little bit about your career journey? How did you get to where you are today? What interesting problems are you excited to solve through your work, through your company, your businesses, through volunteer work? We can start with Courtney.
Hi, Michelle. Thank you. So my name is Courtney Napoles, and I am an engineering manager and lead of language research at Grammarly. If you aren't familiar with Grammarly, it's an AI-powered communication assistant helping tens of millions of users around the world. And our mission is to improve lives by improving communication. And communication is something that I've always been passionate about. How we communicate can be a differentiator. And I love working at Grammarly, where we empower people to communicate more effectively and more confidently, that what they want their messages to say are received that way too. I got here from working in the publishing industry for several years after college. I worked as a book editor, and like I said, communicating well can play a really important role in achieving goals, but it's also like expensive and time consuming to get professional editing help. And so I noticed all these patterns as I was editing, which inspired me to go back to school to learn computational approaches to solve these problems. So I got a PhD in computer science, where I researched natural language processing and machine learning. And then fast forward today, I work at Grammarly, where I'm able to solve these problems that are really large scale, and working with a company that has a mission that I feel really strongly about. So at Grammarly, I lead a team of linguists and researchers who are working on developing our communication suggestions. One of our core responsibilities is to ensure that all of our suggestions have really high quality, both in terms of being accurate, but also by being ethical. And so one of our, through this, our responsibility is really to make sure that the product doesn't propagate bias, cause harm, or offend people. And so we do a lot of research and develop resources to really instill these values into our product.
That's amazing. Thank you for being here. Sam?
Sure. Hi, everyone. A little background about me. So I've been in the industry for about 11 years now. I've worked in engineering orgs at various size startups. So post-college, I started off at Box. I saw it grow from about 200 employees to over 1,000. And I also saw it transition from being a private to a public company. After that, I went to a small startup called DataFox with about 20 employees. So very different type of experience. And I got to see them get acquired by Oracle. So really experiencing extreme ends of the company size spectrum. Towards the end of my time there, I became an eng manager, but when I was deciding to leave, I realized I wanted to go back to an IC role. So, and in addition to that, I wanted to work for a mission-driven company. So luckily I found Nova Credit, which is where I'm at today. So Nova Credit's mission is to build a more fair and inclusive financial system for the world. And one way we do that is we help immigrants use their credit history from the country they are coming from to the country they are going to, so that when they come here, they're not starting off from square one. And I've been there for about 3 years now, and I've really enjoyed it and excited to tell you all about it.
Amazing. And I'm going to butcher your name. Is it Sara or is it Sara?
Hey, I'm Sara. I'm Sara Inés Calderón. I'm based in Austin, Texas. I work as a mobile engineer for a company based here. I've also been running my own technology consulting company for a while. And so in addition to that, I've been working with Women Who Code Austin since 2015. So I don't know, I can't do math at this point in the day, but it's been a while. And I think this is my third career. I forgot to mention, definitely I'm happy and privileged to be here with y'all. I started off as a newspaper engineer. I know there was a question about career switching, a newspaper reporter, and then I did blogging, and I worked in kind of like digital media spaces before I decided to make the transition to technology, which I did via code school. And throughout my work in technology, I think what's really exciting when you think about like innovation is there's opportunities for innovation in a variety of ways. And I would say, you know, what I've found really the most thrilling about work in the tech industry has been able to create opportunities for folks who are looking to break in, right? I mean, I know anyone who's been a career switcher knows finding that first job is just like such a slog. And so I've been able to, through my company Tercera, and also through working with some of the, I've mostly worked at like teeny tiny pre-series A startups, creating apprenticeship programs, creating internship programs that can really give people that first initial technology experience they need to then go on and, you know, make a gajillion dollars, as I was saying earlier. And that's been really exciting for me. Tercera was a company that I kind of codified a few years ago, you know, with the aim explicitly to do that, but also to, you know, give portions of our profits to, you know, organizations that support communities of color. And I just kind of want to throw that out there, that I think a lot of times we think about innovation as this thing that like is institutional and has to happen with help and what can I do? But I think that's what I realized is like, I can make these choices and I can, you know, hire who I want to hire, and I can decide how we spend this money. And that can be meaningful as well. So thank you.
Yeah, amazing. Karina, last but not least.
Hi, so nice to meet you all. I'm Karina. I'm a director of design and research at Opower, which is a division within Oracle Energy and Water. So I actually think, Samantha, we may have been in the same Oracle office because DataFox and Opower were on different floors within the same building before the pandemic. But before that, I had a background in consumer technology. I worked on design teams at companies including Lyft and Twitter. But going all the way back, I grew up in 8 different countries as a kid. And that really set me on my current trajectory because I just had a passion from childhood in how different people work. So different behaviors, different cultures. And I really brought that to my college experience where I majored in anthropology, and then my professional experience where I basically am doing applied anthropology within design organizations and tech environments to understand how people's expectations, needs, wants affect how people interact with technology and how the technology can evolve in order to better suit humanity. So I've been passionate about climate change for a long time. I'm so thrilled to be in my current role because we're using behavioral science to motivate people to make better energy choices. And it's really a chance to sort of marry my passion for anthropology and culture with my passion for a more livable climate for ourselves and future generations.
Thank you for sharing. I mean, I'm so inspired just hearing even your intros here. To go on to the topic, right, of our panel today, I'd love to hear from you all. Just what are some different ways in which companies can actually encourage innovation?
Yeah, so I think that one big way that might not always be talked about as much is creating an open and inclusive environment. First, you know, there are 2 particular aspects here that I want to focus on. One of them is making sure that it's okay to make mistakes, because not every project is going to succeed, but you can still celebrate the learnings that come from the failures. And, you know, it's really important to shift the mindset to see every failure as a learning opportunity that can bring us closer to that successful innovation. We can see what the lessons are from what didn't succeed and how we can apply that in the future. And this is really taking a scientific mindset and recognizing that innovation comes from creativity, but also iteration. So any sort of insights, artifacts, or processes can be repurposed to help us get closer to that ultimate goal. And then, by creating this environment where we really recognize that unsuccessful launches aren't necessarily failures, this can encourage people to be more honest and be more daring in suggesting ideas or taking risks. The second way in which I want to say that we can create a more open and inclusive environment is that at Grammarly, we build a really we build a very strong feedback culture where we encourage people and we create venues for people to provide feedback to their peers all the time, not just their peers actually, but to anybody whom they work with. And this can create trust. This does create trust, but it also opens up the opportunity to share more ideas. And then we also create space to collaborate with people from different backgrounds and functions. So for instance, our AI teams are all cross-functional, including everybody from engineers to linguists. And these people are all brought together by the same mission, but they have different perspectives. And in this open environment, we want people to have to trust their colleagues and to understand that they can take these risks by offering a different suggestion or perspective.
I just like to add on to that. Absolutely agree. The organizations that had the fastest turnaround on new things and the best working relationships were places that had that kind of psychological safety and feedback loops. But one thing that I think can contribute to that as well, and it has in my experience, is like really kind of changing your requirements for job positions and opening it up to people who may not have like certain degrees. A really good example is I did work at a place where they had, principal engineers and senior engineers, and they had this whole structure, and they were really kind of hiring people with similar backgrounds. And then it was like, did you guys like realize that the red dot on the yellow background is really hard to read? Which again is like not necessarily something that you're going to notice if you're like lead coder or whatever. And I think that idea, I just had a conversation actually in the Women Who Code Slack that like, what if you're not the best engineer? And, I think this idea of like what makes you good at something is very narrow in a lot of places. But what makes you a good engineer or a good team member could be, you point out the red dot, or you're really good at, process or taking notes or documentation or like processing, requirements. I mean, there's more than one way to be good. And I think that that's not something that I've encountered in a lot of places that I've worked at.
Karina, I'd like to hear from you too. Yeah.
I think just those are both really great perspectives. And I think to add to that, like setting up a project at the beginning with the expectation on whether this is an innovation project or whether this is like a, just keep the lights on project or a tactical project is really important so that the team has the right orientation. And also so that you have space to set the team up to do the type of innovation work that you're expecting from them. So part of that is like setting up the team to have those diverse perspectives that you're talking about, right? And also like around celebrating failure, are you going to celebrate failure on this project? Like, let's be real, like not all projects can fail. And that's just the reality of working in a business. That's okay. So I think just giving the team the safety ahead of time to say like, hey, you know what, this is a really important project and it can't fail, but we did build in a buffer of a couple extra, weeks where you can play. Like this is like the innovation space, right? And then we have to execute by this date. So I think just like being open and transparent, like from the very beginning when the project is kicking off around what the expectations are from leadership and everyone on the team will just like help people orient towards like how much creativity can they really bring to this problem.
Sam, so you mentioned that the work you do at Nova Credit really helps immigrants access credit, and that especially resonates with you. Can you just elaborate a bit more on that?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, taking a step back, thinking about all the things you need credit for. So you need credit history to get a credit card, but also to get a student loan, a car or home loan, or even things like getting a cell phone plan or being able to rent your first apartment. And it can take months to years to build that credit. And to me, it was shocking to hear that this was still a problem today. It just feels like, since the US is built on top of immigration, how is this not something that's already been solved? And it hit me personally because both of my parents immigrated here from the Philippines. So I know that they had this problem. They had to work really hard despite it. And I know I feel very lucky and privileged for all the things they were able to give me, like being able to be the first of our family to go to college and getting an education that led me to becoming an engineer. So I'm really glad to be working at a place where I feel like I'm giving back to the community and solving this problem that I feel like should be solved going forward. And one particular thing I'm proud of is we've been talking about helping immigrants into the US, but one of the projects that I worked on and launched last year allows us to start serving immigrants into other countries, starting with Singapore, but slowly working on a backlog of countries. So it's really cool to be able to see us helping more and more people over time.
Like that's, I mean, tech innovation for good, right? Like what other ways we can help, right? So kind of switching gears a little bit, Sara, you have also done a lot of work for creating access to tech and bridging the divide for your community in Austin. So can you talk a little bit about your work as the past director of Women Who Code Austin, and what inspired you to found your company, Tercera? Tercera?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So this kind of goes back to something I said earlier, which is, and I did, I think I told Karen the story, but I went to a code school in LA called Sabio, which was founded by immigrants. Okay, I was like, okay, cool. I did this code school and I came back to Austin to look for a job, and it was rough. Girls, I will tell, or ladies, folks, I will say, make sure you have as much savings as you can because you never know what's going to happen. So there I was, like, living on my savings. I had a few contracts coming and I just couldn't get that first tech job. And I'm like, obviously scarred by that experience. But I was like, sitting there talking to my cat, and I was like, you need to go talk to people, Sara. So I went to Meetup and I was just like, and so I started going to meetups, and real talk, they were not all winners, but I did land onto a lightning talk. And it was like the first time I felt like I'm in a comfortable place, I'm in a safe place. I can ask questions. No one's going to laugh at me. And so I went up to the organizer. I was like, man, this is great. Can I volunteer? And so that was really kind of how I started that, right? I mean, I think it kind of goes back to that, be the change, but I was really just kind of at a point where I'm like, I can't do this by myself. I'm a community oriented person and I need community. And so that was in 2015, as I mentioned. And, through the years, I just found it really meaningful to connect with people, to hear other people having similar experiences, just like knowing like, oh, it's not me. I'm not the only one, was, super grateful, great. But at one time, Austin had like 7 or 8 code schools or something really intense. And we were just getting all of these women coming to our organization. They were like, I need a job. I need a portfolio. I don't know how to interview. And so we started doing interview prep, and we started a hackathon that we've been doing for years, just to kind of give people that like project and like work experience teams that they could talk about in interviews. And it's been a really great experience. I mean, it's certainly the pandemic. I remember being in a mobile meetup I was running in like February or something of whatever years that was, 2020. And just being like really weird, not knowing what's going to happen. And that was the last, in-person meetup we had. And so, obviously we've kind of had to, ride that wave of, what's that called? Challenges. And so we'll see kind of how we move forward with that. But, Women Who Code's been a really great, I think, opportunity for me to see that, like, wow, like you can just say, hey, I know these recruiters and I wonder if they'll do a job fair with me. And then they call a friend and they get a space, and then they get it catered, and boom, we have like an event that serves, 100 people. And so, that's what I think is really important. What I'd like folks to take away is that, like, you can just say, hey, I have this idea, and you can ask. I've been rejected a ton of times. I've been laid off a bunch of times. Like, rejection at this point is, it's like part of my emotional stable, or stability, just kind of goes up and down. So, but that's the worst thing that happens. You don't know, or they might say, hey, I can't, but someone else can. And that's what's really interesting. And you can do that in your own organizations as well, right? Like I got rejected. I was like, hey, can I have a budget for us to go to a coffee shop? Like, it'd be easier if you came to the office. And I was just like, nobody wants to go to the office. But so, you just kind of have to bake rejection into like any ideas you might have. And maybe the third idea is the good one and somebody likes it. And then the other thing with Tercera is kind of similar, I've had some really bad experiences in this industry. I mean, I literally, my first job in this industry, I show up the first day, I'm the only woman on the team. I'm 31 years old, okay, at this point. And the guy comes up to me, he's a white guy. He's like, it's so good to have a girl on a team. Like, I Googled you. Why did you write about all this Latino stuff? And inside, I was just like, oh my God, I am stuck here with these fools who think I'm a girl and that because I wrote for ethnic media, that's where I'm at right now, years later. And yeah, that sucked. That was not a good experience. And I've had several, not great experiences since then, which is to say, I've been able to take those bad experiences and say, hey, okay, if I had my dream job, what would that be like? And that's kind of what I poured into Tercera, right? I'm like, if I had my dream job, we would be in a learning environment. If I had my dream job, we would be able to donate to organizations that are helping women and people of color, right? If I had my dream job, this is how it would function. So yeah, so that's kind of, about my community organization, kind of like how I came to, thinking about what would be my dream job, like lo and behold, I have an LLC, like I can turn that into the place that I want to work.
It's always great to hear people who can achieve their dreams and find their dream jobs. A way to make space for yourself. One more question for you. So you mentioned you have a background in journalism. So I was wondering if you had any initial thoughts on generative AI and just its effects on the tech industry. And then I'd also love to hear from you, Courtney, you're at Grammarly, right? So love your thoughts as well after.
So yeah, I mean, I think knowing the little bit I do know about machine learning and whatnot, having friends who are ML engineers, I think it's a really interesting technology, and I think it's really going to help us. I mean, it helps us in a variety of ways, like, Grammarly, right? Or like the spell check in your Gmail, right? Like there's things that we're interacting with this kind of technology already, and that's like really cool. As far as like journalism, I think that, well, and I think this is like our culture, right? This is like this like 24-hour news cycle is like, oh, it's going to replace humans, right? And that's just like so overwrought, because one of the things I learned when I was doing like digital media stuff is like, if you post a picture of a person, that's what people are going to comment on the most, like the most, and share the most. Like we are obsessed with each other as creatures. And so I just don't see that at like any point we're just going to like completely give up our obsession with ourselves and decide that the machine is good enough. Those are my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, I'm very excited about this. I think it's an incredibly fascinating area. I work in this area at Grammarly. We've been working on, various types of different generative AI for more than a decade. And all the attention that we're getting from the press and with the random startups that are coming up every day is really validating the problem that we're trying to solve, which is helping people communicate, more effectively, more efficiently. And with these new developments, it's really increasing the accessibility of the technology so that you don't have to work at a big company to be able to develop some tools or whatnot. However, there are a lot of risks to using these large pre-trained language models. These models are, learning from, like, for instance, the vast amount of all of the information that's on the internet. And there's a lot of good information on the internet. There's also a lot of bad, wrong, harmful information on the internet. So some of the risks of generative AI are in propagating misinformation or bias. So I think, like, let's take it with a grain of salt, because we do need to be careful. There's tremendous promise, but there's also a lot of risk that we can fall into. But I'm still really excited about it. I think that, given what we've been doing at Grammarly as well, like we've been thinking about how do we prevent bias? How do we combat these issues? And we've created these research and development teams that have already been targeting this for a long time. So it's something that I'm really excited to see what what potential future developments will come.
Yeah, it's really exciting stuff. Would like to open this up to Karina and Sam, just at Opower and Nova Credit. What are some of the big challenges that you or your team are tackling at this moment?
Yeah, one of the challenges that we're facing now, and I think we'll always face, is that like every utility customer is different. Like they all have a different home profile, they all have different things that motivate them, they all have different financial situations, household makeups. But we're trying to motivate everyone with a utility bill to make better energy choices. And that includes using less energy. It includes using energy at more efficient times for the grid. So not during like peak times when the grid is really overloaded. And it also includes electrification. So getting people off, natural gas for end uses and onto the grid, which we can, power with clean energy, right? That's the vision here, is to get everything onto electricity and make the grid clean. So one of the things that my team is constantly working on is just like, how can we tailor our existing suite of communications to make more sense for each person on the other end of that communication? Yeah, like I said, due to the variety of people on the other end of the line, like that work is never ending. But it's fun to think about like, okay, like electric vehicle owners, what do they need? Solar customers, what do they need? When we're talking about low to moderate income utility customers, they have specific needs and we design for them too. So just thinking about like how these different, traits that people have in their household energy use, like intersect with each other and intersect with what they need from their utility.
Actually, what I was going to share is has very similar themes to what Karina said, which I think is so cool. But so going back to Nova Credit, we have our primary product is called Credit Passport, and essentially it's the application you go through that where you put in your information, and if you're authorized, it allows us to pull your credit history for you. And similar to what Karina is saying about a lot of different energy suppliers, we have a lot of different credit suppliers that have different requirements about what information we should be collecting, whether that's PII fields, uploading documents. Some of them even require like a selfie to prove you're a living, breathing human. So it's how do we build a UI for a global user base that's easy to use, accessible, trustworthy, that also is flexible enough to be able to collect different types of information in a secure way. And what I find really fun about this is, and I think Courtney mentioned this earlier about how, sometimes when you have a lot of restraints, it just means you have to be more creative and more scrappy. And that's the part of software engineering I love, is being able to dig in with product and design and come together and think, okay, how do we solve this hard problem that no one else has solved before in a way that's also scalable? So yeah, I think it's sometimes very hard, especially in like a highly regulated industry like fintech, but I think it makes the result so much more rewarding once you can solve it.
It's great that you all get to work in such rewarding fields. I would ask as a closing kind of question before Q&A, what's one takeaway that you would like our audience to remember from our conversation today? And maybe we can just go alphabetical. So Courtney, Karina, Sam, and Sara.
Thanks. Well, there are a few themes that I've noticed, and I think talking about being aware of different needs is so important. But what I really do want to emphasize is the importance of taking risks, whether it's through the career changes or working in a job or in a role or with a team where you have a different background from them. Like, this is important, and this can help spur innovation, and also not being afraid of failures. All of these risks are scary and they can hurt us, right? But luckily we have communities like this one where we can go to get the support or to find advocacy to help us, feel stronger as we are taking these risks. So that would be my my takeaway.
Since I come from the design and research angle, I'll go ahead and plug, like lean on your design and qualitative research teams for innovation. Like these functions are really like the bridge between how your end customers think about your product and like what they need from you and like what the company is responsible for doing. And so like, I think good research, like when done well, can really be that seed of innovation where it's not just looking at like usability testing or like, what is the status quo and how's that working? But it's going like well beyond that to say like, what unmet needs exist? Like, how is this particular like group of customers different from this other group of customers? Is it worth designing something unique for this audience? Like, what might that look like? There's a whole bunch of like really far-reaching, innovative questions that like teams like this can help with. So I'd say like that story around like design and engineering and product, like getting together to solve a hard problem, like that is, you know, what I love about work. Like I love when we can all come together and bring our unique lens. And I'd say like, if you have folks like this on your team to lean on for these types of questions, like have conversations with them around like what they're hearing and what that might mean for your work. And if you don't, maybe advocate for hiring some folks like that, because I think that there's a lot of value in having people with that perspective, even at really small companies.
I think after hearing everyone speak, my takeaway would be to, follow your passions and find work that you truly enjoy, whatever that means to you. It doesn't necessarily have to be a mission-driven company, even though that's the theme for our panel. But I feel like when you can enjoy your day-to-day or feel like you're contributing to solving a problem that's important to you in some way, whatever that is, I feel like, at least for me, it makes my day-to-day so much better. And it's really inspiring to hear like for my fellow panelists like speak so passionately about what they work in. And yeah, I think for me, that's also what I'm taking away from all of this. So would encourage all of you to think about that.
Yeah, just basically, I think kind of touches what everyone else has already said, but that you can create innovation in like really small ways, in really short amount of time, if you want to, if you're used to being rejected, if you can count on your colleagues, and if you, are willing to kind of take a little bit of a risk. I would use an example that I had a client and they needed to get a lot of work done. They're like, oh, we're thinking about hiring. And I was just like, what if I found you two interns and you could, you wouldn't have to do recruiting costs, and I could train them. And I managed to convince them to do that. And these two young ladies got their like first foothold, right? And like working at a company. And now one of them works at Shopify and one of them works for like an airline. And, that was just kind of an example of kind of like how you can decide to create innovation in any space that you happen to be in, right? And I think a lot of times it's scary. A lot of times there's like bureaucracy, and like I hate bureaucracy. That's why I work in small organizations. But I did see a question like in the chat, like, how do I, help the, recruiters change their standards or whatever. And I think we've all kind of spoken to that, right? Like you can take that risk. You can talk to your colleagues. You can like involve the organization, say, hey, maybe we're not mission driven, but this is my mission, right? And so I think that that would be what I would say, is that you don't have to, it doesn't have to be big. Because I know for me in the Latino community, especially women, if a woman's making six figures, she can help her parents, she can help her siblings, she can help her grandparents. And when I got my first job, that terrible job, I couldn't quit because I was helping give my money to my great aunt who is still in San Antonio. So, I mean, that's something to think about, right? Like that impact doesn't have to be global. But for me, knowing that like helping one person make a lot of money is helping their whole family oftentimes, that's a big deal, right? So anyway, yeah.
I love that. So I'm going to just recap. So 4 takeaways. 1, Courtney, take risks. 2, Karina, collaboration, lean on your design and qualitative research teams. 3, Sam, follow your passion, find work that you enjoy. And then Sara, you can create innovation in small ways in a short amount of time if you want to. And for me, I mean, I work at Zendesk, right? Which, we sell customer support software. And I would say it's somewhat, tech for good. But for myself, definitely that your message of, being mission driven for yourself is really important to me. And so even as someone who's not in a necessarily technical role, I do work like systems and spreadsheets and whatnot, but not to the degree that you all do. I really loved and enjoyed hearing from you all. So we've got some time left, and we have some questions in the chat Q&A. So we'll just like kind of hop into that part of the talk today. So one question that I really am curious and passionate about is for all of you, how has mentorship or sponsorship played a role in your career? And then maybe we can do like a reverse alphabetical order this time. Sara, Sam, Karina, Courtney.
All right, I'll make it quick because I know I talk a lot. I feel like I've benefited mostly from like peer mentorship. I've real talk. I've been searching high and low for mentors for years, and I was never really able to find one. And given that I was working at smaller organizations, like I was my mentor when you're like the only engineer. I think that that's really important. And that's something that we discount a lot because it's always this like hierarchical idea. But I just really want to emphasize that like maybe your friend that's always helping you with CSS is your mentor. Like you don't think of it that way, right? Or like maybe, you just randomly met someone at a mixer and they offer to help you with your resume. They're your resume mentor, right? And so cobbling together mentorship, I think, is something we don't consider as like real mentorship. So that's what I would say is I have definitely had those friends who are like, no, dude, this is the da. I'm like, oh, and that was just the one piece I needed to keep going, to get unblocked. So yeah.
I remember at one point, one of my peers asked me, like, I noticed that it seems like a lot of people are like mentoring you, like they're going to coffee chats with you, you're having all these conversations, like, how did you do that? And I remember like being surprised and not like thinking about it. And, but now that I reflect on it, I realize it's because I always ask for help or just questions, or I'm not afraid to, if I see someone in my org that I just like admire and respect, I'm like, hey, can I chat with you and ask you like how you're so good at this thing? Or like, can I tell you about my situation and I want to get your advice? And I highly recommend doing that. I found that generally people are excited to help you, and that especially if you're specific in your asks, that they're always willing to help. Of course, like sometimes they don't have time and they have to say that up front, but generally like it doesn't hurt to ask. So yeah, that's what I would recommend.
I also would not be where I am today had it not been for a huge number of people who believed in my potential, even when I had like nothing concrete to point to like warrant, some of the opportunities that came my way. So I think that there's this study that I read a while ago that says that like men often get promoted on their potential and women more often get promoted on their performance, right? So I think to break out of that, I think for all of us as mentors, it's important to be aware of that bias and make sure that you're always looking for people who have potential, who could benefit from mentorship. Even if they don't have something concrete in their background that says that they, deserve an opportunity, maybe give them the space to try it, right? Like, I think if it's not too risky, like let someone stretch beyond what they have shown themselves to be capable of and see what they can do. They might surprise you, and make sure that those opportunities aren't all going to men, because that happens a lot at organizations. So I'd say like for myself, like I have benefited a lot from mentorship and encourage everyone to seek it out. And I think it can be risky to admit that you don't know things when you're also trying to prove yourself, right? Like I get that there's like some tension there where like, people who are trying to stretch into a role that might be like new for them, like might not want to ask a lot of questions and sort of like show that they're struggling with some of the basics. But I think that there are ways to use question asking to like build strong cross-functional relationships, and sort of like also clue people into the fact that like you do maybe need a little bit more support and scaffolding, and that it's worth it, because like investing early on in a new job in me means that I will be much more useful in the future to you.
Yeah, I really like what Karina and Sam had said about reaching out to potential mentors and asking questions as a way to do this. One thing that I think about with mentors and trying to find mentors is that, you know, one, it can be daunting or intimidating to reach out to somebody whom you may not have a relationship with or who might be a superior. But, you know, in order to help create a mentorship and make that seem less risky, one way to do that is to have a targeted goal. Like, what do you want to get out of this? And specifically ask that person, you know, don't just say, I'd love to learn from you. Can you be my mentor? Ask them specifically to help you on that goal, or help you with a specific problem that you're facing. This can be really helpful as a tool to build a mentorship with somebody whom you might not have an existing relationship. And then I just want to plus one what Sara was saying about peer mentors. My peer mentor group has been such a font of support and inspiration and encouragement. And just, you know, we just formed by reaching out to, you know, a couple of friends of mine. We just reached out to other women at similar stages in their career and just, you know, get together once a month. And it has been so wonderful for me, even though these are just my peers. Like, there's so much that you can gain from peer mentorship.
Absolutely. Having a community, especially for myself, at least, of other women really helps motivate and inspire me, just hearing about other people's accomplishments. There are a couple of questions in the chat. Before I pop into that, I'm going to do a plug for a session we had, I think Wednesday, with Suja and Suzanne on mentorship. So I think those are all recorded, if I'm recalling correctly. If you want to watch that, for me, at least, it was really great to hear. And then just a quick note on mentorship versus sponsorship, because for myself, I've been lucky to find and be matched in formal or informal programs to mentors. But if you're looking for career acceleration at your company, I really recommend that you figure out how to get a sponsor or a champion, because these are people who are going to be advocating for you when you're not in the room, right? So for me personally, sponsorship at Zendesk made a huge difference. And so, I mean, I think mentorship is really great, but when you're trying to be strategic in your career, I really recommend thinking about who can sponsor you as well. So I'm going to go into a question from, I think it was Olivia. I'm trying to find the questions. Olivia, so how do you create feedback culture? Are there specific tools that help foster it? And I know, Courtney, you had mentioned there's a strong culture of feedback at Grammarly, but open to others as well if you have experience with cultivating that.
I mean, I can say at Grammarly, like, very fortunate working there that we do have this feedback culture, and it's a part of our values are a part of our values is giving and receiving feedback, and this is emphasized at a company level. And so we have regular 360 and peer feedback periods, and we also have tools where you can provide feedback to any one of your colleagues, and that feedback could go just to them and their manager, or it can go and, you know, publicly, like if it's praise or, you know, positive feedback for somebody, it's shared on Slack. So this is something that we do have, and that, you know, the use of it is normalized over time. At a smaller level, like recognizing that it's hard to affect change at that level unless you are one of the people in charge. On a more micro level, one of the things that we've done to help encourage this environment is borrowing from design crits, where, you know, designers will get together and critique early designs. So we've then established these crit and collabs, which are essentially like you can come to the room with any idea throughout any stage of its development, and ask for feedback, ask for other people's input, and creating the space where it's okay, and it's you know, where it's okay to come with an idea that might not be fully fleshed out, and inviting feedback. This seems to really help encourage that culture as well. I'd be curious though if anyone else has ideas here.
Just real quick, and I think it's kind of building on what you're saying. Again, I've worked at smaller organizations, so I've gotten to build the company or the organizational culture. And just like sharing resources on how to give feedback is a really good segue into giving feedback. Like I, would find like tips on how to give good, PR feedback, how to do a good PR review, right? And you just can share those articles in whatever channel on Slack, and then like bring them up at a lunch and learn. And then I know, I would, in a lot of places like PR reviews are required, right? And so you can kind of build that into your, whatever processes you have on your team. You can just say, hey, we're going to have feedback now, and here's how to have feedback, right? I mean, it doesn't have to be someone else's job, I guess is what I'm saying. You can decide like, hey, I want to have feedback here. Here's some resources on what that is. And now we're going to practice. So anyway.
I think as part of like being the change that I want to see in the world, like part of creating a feedback culture also comes from asking feedback for myself, and also like making sure that my team sees me doing that. Like I do try to share with my team, like when I'm hearing feedback about like myself or, their work, that they know that like I'm also like part of the system, right? And I also want to hear what's working and not working, and that we're all growing together. Like we never stop learning. So I'd say that that's something that I like really try to sort of like mirror to create more of that, because I want us all to get more comfortable hearing what's working and what's not working, and not taking that personally, but just taking that as part of like doing the best possible work together. And I did want to just like say one quick thing about sponsorship, because I think it was such a great point that you made, Michelle. One thing that I found to be really successful in terms of finding sponsors is to just make sure that as many people as possible know about your work. You don't necessarily know who's going to advocate for you when you're not in the room. So if a lot of people know about your accomplishments, you're just increasing the odds that one of them will resonate with it and advocate for it. So I'd say if you're sort of like going person by person and trying to like bring them on as an ally or advocate for them as a sponsor, you might get there, you might strike gold. But if you're able to share your successes in a meeting with 20, 50 people, one of those people might follow up with you after and say, tell me more, or they might advocate for you in a meeting that you're not in and you're not even aware is happening. So don't be shy about bragging.
And it's something that I think women often don't do enough. Just really good point. And it's why creating and cultivating relationships is so important. So I'm going to kind of switch it back to kind of our theme again a little bit more. So Hannah asked a question. I'm looking how to balance between tech innovation for good and the realities of a difficult market, where the ends of being a paradox between what people ideally want to build versus needing to deal with the bottom line. So I don't know if anyone wants to hop in and answer that question. So for it, Karina and then Sam.
I was just going to say, like, I think that this is where the organization's business model is really important to know before you join. Like, how does your company make money? Because at the end of the day, like, that's what you're going to be responsible for, especially when the going gets tough. So ideally, if the bottom line of your organization is aligned with the mission that you personally care about, then the better the company does, the more you will be driving your mission, right? And if the mission is like a side project or a money loser for the business, that's the first thing that's going to get cut when money's tough. So ask tough questions about the business model, like learn how the business operates, like when you're interviewing, if this is something that you really care about, or look for government jobs or nonprofit jobs. Like there are places outside of industry where you can be more sure that like that alignment will persist.
Yeah, Karina, you put it what I was trying to put together in my head, but couldn't put the sentences together. I think to add to that, also just looking at the company's values, like what does this company truly care about? What do they say is important to them? And looking at that when you are looking at whether you want to work for this company, in addition to the business and you know, what is their bottom line.